This is the official podcast for Season 2 of the HBO documentary series 100 Foot Wave. I'm your host, Nicole McNamara. You just saw episode 5, Lost at Sea, which I've been referring to as the Day of Carnage, and it's a doozy. It's nothing I ever dreamed of wanting to relive, but here I am. To talk about all the drama from this episode, I'm here today with Joe Lewis, the executive producer of 100 Foot Wave. He's the guy that makes it all happen. He's basically the glue that keeps it together. Joe, thanks so much for joining me today to talk about this wild and crazy episode.
Thanks, Nicole. It's great to be here. I love the 100 Foot Wave podcast, and I love Season 2, Episode 5. So this is perfect.
5 is definitely up there with one of the best from Season 2, for sure. And we love you also.
Thanks. I love you, and both of you.
Which, for my listeners out there, Joe and I are kind of related.
Related, but kind of.
Well, we're all globally related, but...
but in a more specific way.
Yeah. Joe is married to my beautiful goddess of a cousin, Yara Martinez.
Second cousin?
Yeah, I just call her my cousin. My dad and her mother are cousins, and they love to fight with each other.
And now look, we all have a TV show together.
Thanks for taking our crazy call that one day.
No problem.
Yeah, we had never met, and I had called Yada because I had this crazy idea to make a documentary about Garrett, Cotty, and CJ, and I was adamant that I was going to do it. So I called Yada for some advice, and she said, "Oh, you should talk to my husband, Joe." And he was nice enough to take our call because he's a very busy, successful man with all his Fleabag Emmys. And you graciously listened to us and offered to help us, and here we are.
It's amazing. I can't believe it. Yada and I talk about it. I mean, it's just incredible to have something start as will you give advice question, and then we end up here 4 or 5 years later. It's also funny just to think about, the original project, which was titled The Road to Nazare and was about Cotty and CJ and Garrett coming back from injuries and, what the show ended up becoming. And you jump in thinking it's one thing and it ends up being something completely different and much, much, much better.
Originally, we went into it thinking, we had a feature-length documentary, and now it's a series. So how did that happen for you? Because I really wanted an Oscar. And then you guys called and were like, we're doing a series.
As I best remember it, the way 100 Foot Wave went from what it was originally intended to be, which was an IMAX feature film, to an ongoing series, was Garrett sent us a box, truly a box of just like photos on CD and other outdated methods and old hard drives. And at that point, I think we had been shooting the show for a number of months, tracking you going into the 2019-2020 surf season. And we get, the proverbial box of tapes shows up. And on one of those hard drives, as unbelievable as it is, was something you guys had forgot to mention that existed, which was 3 years or so of full coverage of you guys at the beginning of the North Canyon project. So it immediately expanded the scope of what we were doing. Now we didn't just have the footage that we'd been shooting for a number of months, but we had the beginning of this story. It is still unbelievable to me that no one mentioned it, that we never knew that existed, that those kinds of stories happened. But one day, just years of footage showed up, and the next thing you do a first cut. And once we had all that footage, and we had maybe more great footage than we knew what to do with, the first cut of the project was 5 or 6 hours. And rather than try to whittle it down to 2, Chris Smith, the director, and my fellow executive producer had the idea, why don't we just try to put main and end titles on the show every 45 minutes or so, just to see what it might look like if it was a series. And it just worked amazingly. And, the show changed so much over the next year, but in the final season 1, I can still see so much of just that original first cut. So anyway, a lot of footage that we found from you and from Garrett, and a lot of just stuff we discovered about the world that it could just expand, and we just never ran out, and we still haven't run out of things that I think are interesting to follow. So yeah.
The waves are so fickle and only during a certain time of year. And we have so many characters that there's so many stories happening at one time. What are some of the challenges with this particular project of filming the 100-foot wave?
There's a lot of solutions in the production that can cause problems in the post-production. For example, you just never know where Garrett's going to go and when something's going to happen. And now that we follow a lot of characters, the same is true. But it's probably more true for Garrett than almost anyone else. So, you can't just arrange a shoot. We shoot half the year, maybe more at this point, almost full time with 5 or 6 or more people in Nazare. So 24 hours a day, almost 7 days a week, we're rolling on people, and we're just following things. And, the truth is it's hard to schedule real life happening. So, and there's a lot of things that don't seem exciting at the time that will be exciting later in the edit. And, like life, and, when those big meaningful things happen at the beginning, sometimes it just seems like, a very small moment or decision. And, the goal is to have a show with just ridiculously big scope. And part of that is just capturing a lot. So the solution to how you do it is we just hire a lot of incredible directors of photography and shoot in Nazare full time. But then that causes other problems on the post end, because, we can shoot thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, which we do. But ultimately, it's going to be under 6 hours that make up the season. So there's a lot of other people then that have to sort through that. So then the problem becomes, how do you just track stories? How do you find the good ones? How do you just balance everything, the surf, the heart, the character, the place, and balance all those things? So, it's what I love about series. You just get to keep making it and figuring things out, but trying to shoot it all is a problem, and then trying to edit it all down is a problem. That's just that's the work of doing it. There's no giant problems. Just trying to make something great. It's like trying to surf the 100-foot wave, perhaps. There's just, I think
it's your 100-foot wave.
Well, I think, we would probably work on the show forever. And we're just trying to do something that's incredible and just trying our best.
Yeah, and in season 1, we mainly followed my family and Cody, the original pioneers of the big waves of Nazare. And in season 2, we meet many new characters. So how did you decide to introduce new characters? And then how did you decide which characters were worth introducing?
It was just such a slow evolution of spending more time in the town, being excited by so much in the town, just starting to shoot more and more. I had heard from a bunch of people, and Chris did too, about this teenage surfer. And, we thought that sounded like someone interesting. So, it's a very small town, and we went and we talked to Tony. I don't even remember when we first made contact, but, it's not a big town, and you will either run into or hear of people before. I met Michelle in a parking lot one day right outside the harbor, and I was doing something at the parking lot right outside the harbor that you see on the show. And Michelle was there, and we started talking. And next thing you know, her and Ian are in the show. I think just those sort of chance connections in such a small place. And then you just follow them up. And there's a lot of things that we shot that didn't make it into the show. But, the real way is just trying to find interesting stories, meet interesting people, shoot a ton of them. We could probably edit several more episodes of the show with everything that didn't make it. And, the hardest part is there's so many amazing stories and amazing people that we all know that you just can't fit it all in one show, because you have to give time to the stories that you are going to follow. But I will say, became apparent pretty quickly in the 2020-21 season that Justine and Fred and Tony and Cody and CJ and Michelle and Ian and the Brazilians, that just everyone was worth spending a ton of time with. So it just expanded from having a full-time camera people with McNamara's and with Cody to everybody, and also in the town trying to meet new people and find new stories.
One of them is Tony Laureano. How did you meet him and find him? Because he's kind of one of more the younger underground trying to prove himself. So how did you meet Tony, and then what made you think this is definitely one of the characters we want to focus a lot of our efforts with.
So we had heard about, I don't remember exactly when we first heard about him, but we heard about a local teenager who was out there in the big waves. And, we're just always, it's part of the reason we just shoot with so many cameras and shoot full time in Nazare is we're just always looking for interesting people, interesting families, interesting stories that intersect with the big wave world. And we heard about the teenage surfer and we met him, and it wasn't a lot of thought at the beginning. It just sounded interesting. So we started filming with Tony, and we quickly met the rest of his family and Ramon and Susanna. And they're just also great and interesting and so welcoming. And it wasn't, a huge decision, is Tony going to be a huge character in the show? We just thought it was interesting and kept shooting with him. And then in the edit, the story starts to become apparent, and I love his arc for the season as a character, as a person. I love that he's growing and improving and getting better. And like everything on the show, though, it just goes back to trying to find interesting people who are trying to do something incredible and following them. And we were able to do that with Tony and continue to do so.
We get to speak with Tony a little bit later in this podcast episode to learn a little bit about his start in the big wave surf scene.
Tony's great. I love that family.
They've been through a lot. How many camera guys would you say we have in Nazare at any given time?
We have 6 to 8 full-time verite people on the ground from October to the end of March. And verite means they're just shooting real life. And some of those are with the McNamaras. Some of them are with Justine and Fred. All the characters have camera people, but that also aren't with them full time. We just try to cover everything that we can. And then when there are swells, we could have up to another 6 or 8 action camera people. In addition, we have a drone, at least one drone flying every day of the year. And we have a camera person shooting action full time during the year. And then during events like the WSL, we get even bigger, and there are so many more people in Nazare, so we need people to help us move through the crowd. And, that's probably the biggest that it gets during the WSL, but it's a big operation on the ground.
Can you talk a little bit about Laurent Pujol and how he came to be with the 100-foot wave and how you guys work together and how important really what he captures is to the success of 100-foot wave?
Maybe this will show you how important it is. I'm holding up to the zoom camera my phone, and you can see there's a picture that Helio Antonio took, which is Laurent and Toe out on a day in front of a giant wave. There's no surfer on the wave. I think it was the day in season 2 that no surfers were allowed out, but it's just them in front of this massive wave shooting. And I love that photo. Laurent's incredible. I mean, he just does something that no one else does. We met him originally through Salt and Air and Mike Prickett, who you see featured in season 1 of the show. And Laurent is a former pro surfer turned cinematographer. You meet him a lot more in episode 2. And he was, just one of the people that was in Nazare shooting a lot. I think he started shooting on the back of a jet ski a season or 2 before we got there, and met him early on and realized his work was great. And I think there are a lot of cameras in Nazare shooting action, dozens at least. I mean, during most major swells, and any given day, there's probably a dozen people there if there's any surfers out. And I think for us, what we want to do with the show is make something that is epic in scope and feels big and feels unique and feels special and is bigger than any other way that you could see surfing, or bigger than any other way that you could see what happens in Nazare. So part of that is just trying to get incredible angles that no one else gets. So from drones and improving drone technologies and getting closer to Laurent, getting right up as close as safely possible to the surfers, just about trying to get incredible images for the show that you can't get anywhere else. And he uniquely gets a view no one else can get. All the action photographers from the cliff, they're all looking down on the wave, and it's something entirely different when you're at the wave level or shooting up.
We also get to speak with him a little later on today's podcast episode. Okay, my most important question of this conversation. In this particular episode, I would say it is the most dramatic one we've ever had in 100 Foot Wave. CJ goes missing. It ends with him missing. How do you manage wanting drama for the show, but at the same time not wanting to see your friends, family, and loved ones in these positions?
I want to make the most exciting show where everybody comes home safely. I don't think any of the show is dependent, on wipeouts in the water. And I think more often than not, the most exciting drama, the most exciting struggles happen outside of the water, happen over long periods of time, and happen through great exploration through storytelling. I just trust that with so many incredible people and such an incredible town and such an incredible sport, that interesting stuff is going to happen, and interesting stuff just keeps happening. I will say, I just love the structure of Five. Before this podcast was the first time that I finished Five and then went back immediately and watched the opening. And I just love what the editors did and what Chris did, where it starts and ends in the same place. And, the bell that you hear in the end, right as the camera goes underwater, is the way we start the episode. And, it just feels like you're really seeing an incredible arc for CJ in such a short period of time, him joining the club. And it just, feels like the coming of age of CJ into that moment. I just hope they find CJ. I'm going to have to tune into episode 6 to find out if everything turned out okay.
They better find him, or else they better fire their spotter.
She's very good, though.
I know you are a super busy man, Joe, so I really appreciate you carving out the time to talk with me about all the things that it takes to make 100 Foot Wave.
This was my best part of the day. I love talking about this show. It's such a great show. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this podcast and for watching the show, too.
And I'll see you in a few days.
Nicole's turning 40, everybody.
As promised, we're now going to sit down and chat with Tony Laureano, the youngest big wave surfer out at Nazare. Thanks for coming, Tony. It's a real pleasure to get to spend this time with you and get to know more about you. I've had the pleasure of spending a little time with your mom, but not you, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Thanks.
How old were you when you moved to Nazare?
When I moved to Nazare, I was 14. 14, 15.
Did you have to ask your parents, can we move to Nazare, or did they
It was kind of like my father. And he just told me, okay, we're spending more time here. Like, I'm still surfing with him. I'm doing all the courses in Nazare, everything. You're starting to surf in Nazare. And then we had a conversation like, so do you think that you want to take this seriously? I was like, yeah, I think so. And then we decided to go to Nazare. And
so at 14, you decided you wanted to?
14. Yeah. I did like my first session around 13, 14, but then on 14 I was like, okay, maybe this is it.
When did you start surfing?
I started surfing, I was 3-4 years old, something like that.
And your dad has always been a surfer?
My dad, he was always been a surfer, and was with him that I started. Then when I was between 8-10 years old, I went to the surf school of João Macedo, and then kind of like the passion of big waves started. I mean, the passion of big waves started when I was a kid, because the sister of João Macedo, my godmother, and so João Macedo is kind of like uncle to me, and he was living in Mavericks, and he was like telling me stories from Mavericks and sending me like caps and t-shirts from Mavericks, and like the big wave thing kind of like started there.
So what was it about surfing that made you feel like this is what I want to do?
I mean, surfing, I think, is one of the few sports that you have the opportunity to be like yourself and the nature, And I mean, that feeling of standing up on the board and riding like basically the nature and being in connection with the nature is just, I mean, it's really hard to explain to someone that never surfed, like the feeling, but it's just amazing.
At what point did your dad start driving you? Did your dad say, hey, let's go do this? Because I know with Garrett and Beryl, like Garrett's constantly, come on, Beryl. And Beryl's like, no, it's too big. Garrett's always the one encouraging Beryl and trying to get him to be out there surfing. So is that how it was for you? Or were you more like, Dad, please take me, please drive me?
So with me, I mean, I've been driving skis and like doing towing, but not with waves, just with a board behind the ski since really young. I know since 8, something like that. And I don't know. There was a session. I was supposed to be just on a ski, and then one of the skis it wasn't working, and my father was like, "Okay, so you come with me on the ski and you stay on the board waiting for me because I'm gonna change with someone and I'm gonna surf." I was like, "Okay." And yeah, I was on the channel with the board. I saw like everyone cutting waves. And I was like, I mean, if they can do it, I can do it. And I went there, I just got pounded all session. And my father went to pick me up and he was like, "Do you wanna go out or you wanna like try again?" I was like, "No, I wanna try again, you know?" And then after that session, I was the one that, "Okay, father, so today can I go?" And he was like, "Nah, today is too big." And I was like, okay. Yeah, and today can I go? And basically that was it. It was kind of like more me and my father putting limits, because I mean with 13, 14 years old, you do 2 sessions, you're like, okay, I can handle everything. And there was like huge days that my father was like, "No, you're not going today." And I was like, "Yeah, come on, let me go." "No, you're not going today." So it's kind of like the opposite.
When did you first go to Nazare? Do you remember as a kid going up to Nazare, or was it not until
Okay, so
the big waves were popular?
I don't really remember the first time I went to Nazare, but I remember the first time I saw like the big waves in Nazare. Do you remember the swell that Antonio Silva went to the rocks and?
Very well. I remember that day.
Yeah.
I was on the walkie-talkie saying, "He's dead. He's dead. The guy is dead."
Okay, so on that day was the first time that I saw like the really huge waves of Nazare, and I was like, "Wow, those guys are crazy," you know. And yeah, I think that's my first memory.
And that was probably
2012?
Yeah, 12.
Yeah,
I think 12. Yeah. You don't remember ever really going to Nazare as a kid?
I mean, I don't really remember that because my memory, I think I already have like a lot of salt water inside and I forget everything.
That's what Garrett says, is that he's had so many poundings, he's lost his memory. So every day's a new day. And that's why he's so excited for life, because everything's new, because he doesn't remember anything.
Okay, that's a good way
It's like,
to see
"Oh,
it.
look at my wife. I have this beautiful wife. How did I get here?" What do you remember about when we first arrived in 2010? Do you?
The first thing I remember like about Garrett, I remember to her that, yeah, okay, so there's one guy from outside that came to surf the big waves of Nazare. It was like, I mean, big waves, like we have big waves here, you know. I was kind of like, okay. And the first time I saw the name like Garrett McNamara, I was having dinner with my family, and like the famous wave that put Nazare in the world. And it was like, yeah, so Garrett McNamara surfs like 30 meters wave, world record maybe. And I was like, wow, okay. So yeah, we have a huge wave in Portugal. And that was like the first time I heard about Garrett. And then I was like, okay, so Garrett, huh? And yeah.
How would you describe your relationship with your father?
He is the reason of everything, like literally. But sometimes it's kind of like love and hate relationship, you know. But that's kind of normal. But I mean, my father, he was the one that turned me into the biggest waves I ever surfed. He was the one that went to rescuing me like after probably the best paddle rides I ever did, you know. So having the opportunity to share that on like with the person that you love the most, and one person that you know that's gonna do everything to pick you up and to rescue, that's, I mean, like it's a feeling from another world, you know. It's just amazing.
So this episode was pretty crazy. Episode 5, we see a lot of
action,
near-death experiences, carnage. Yes, I believe we're calling it the Day of Carnage during the Gigantes de Nazare challenge. Even in this episode, we see that you have a pretty big wipeout.
Yeah, I did.
So can you tell me about this horrific wipeout on the Day of Carnage?
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually my second wave. My first wave, I did like a really good line. The lip almost caught me, but I managed to go through and finish the wave. And I was like, okay, that's a good first wave. And then on the second one, it wasn't like the famous peaks of Nazare. It was one like long lefts and really, really bumpy. And I was just kind of like trying to survive on that wave. And then there was a ski that had to leave a camera. And as soon like I hit the track from the
wake,
ski, the wake. You know, like when you fall and you kind of like go through the wave and you're like, okay, I'm safe.
Yeah, I'm gonna pop out the back.
I'm gonna pop out the back. Like my
No
father's gonna be
problem.
there to pick me up. I remember like I came to the surface. I gave like 2 breaths and then the wave just like kind of like sucked me over, and I was like, oh, that's not good. Then I came to the surface. I see my father, and he was really close to the wave that was like on the back, and I just told him, okay, I'm good. Like, go around and I'll be here waiting for you. And I just got pounded like with a huge white water. And then actually who picked me up was Shumbu, because my father got stuck on the inside because the inside was gnarly. And Shumbu was trying to save Michelle. And then Yan picked up Michelle and Shumbu saw me. And there was like the ski of Shumbu here. And he was like on the top of the wave. And there was like those white triangles, you know, and that one was like the worst one, you know. It was like straight on my head. I got pounded. And then Shumbu just came, just picked me up and left me in the beach to grab my board. And that was it.
I feel like Lucas picks everybody up.
Yeah, well, Lucas in the water is just like he can't like stop for not even 1 minute. He's always doing something. If he's not surfing, he's driving. If he's not driving, he's like doing the rescue for someone. If he's not doing any of those, he's just like surfing the waves with his skis. Like it's impressive.
You say that you knew it was a bad wipeout when you saw your dad's eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually my father, that I can see when I spend like a lot of time underwater, because when I come to the surface, he just looks at me like with some really big open eyes. And I was like, okay, this was a bad wipeout. And so when he's paddling, it's even worse because you can see my board like getting stuck because of the leash.
Tombstoning.
Yeah, and because I'm really deep and I come to the surface and his eyes is just like crazy. So yeah, every time I see those eyes, I was like, okay, that was a good pound.
Is he ever crying?
I mean, I never saw him crying like because of a situation like that. But my mother, I didn't saw her because I was surfing, but a lot of people already told me like on that wipeout, actually, she started crying because I got like really pounded.
You thought you were going to pop out the back, but you actually went over the falls.
Yes.
So in that moment where you realize this is going to be bad, how do you prepare yourself? Is there anything different you do than
I mean,
normal?
basically on a moment like that, I think I just accept it, you know, like there's nothing I can do. I can't like pop up my fingers and okay, I'm going to be on the ski, you know, so I try to don't overthink, basically, you know. I know people that they kind of like roll into a ball.
But you don't do that.
I don't do that, no, because doing that I'm going to be like, first of all, wasting energy, you know. And the truth is that the waves is so powerful. Even if you're like that, you're gonna finish like with your knee, like on your neck, your shoulder is gonna be on your foot. So I just wait. You know, I can't do nothing. I'm just gonna wait.
So also in this episode, because it is the day of carnage, we see Kadi and Alamo with their wipeout on the jet ski, where they end up in the rocks.
Oh yeah.
Were you there?
I wasn't there. I was actually in Madeira with Justine, and we did like a fun session, and then we just arrived to the Airbnb, and there was this video online, and I mean that's just unreal. Like what happened on that moment was just unreal, and then like Coty trying to climb the rocks and then the waves coming. That's just gnarly.
Worst nightmare for anyone at Nazare.
Yeah.
Since day one, anytime I'm doing safety, I'm always staring at that rock right in front of the lighthouse.
Kind of like on the corner.
Yeah, and I always think to myself, okay, if Garrett ends up over there, I see this little hole. He can climb into that hole, and I can like throw him water, and I can throw him bananas until there's no more waves, and he can then like climb out of the hole inside of the rock, and he'll survive. Like I tell myself all these stories of how he can survive being in the rocks. But Cody survived it.
Cody survived. And it's like you need like a lot of cold blood to like kind of try to climb. I mean, I think it was more like survival mode,
for sure.
But I mean, still, it's gnarly.
So how does it feel to be the youngest one out there?
So to be the youngest one out there, I mean, I think now it kind of feels normal, you know. At the beginning, I felt that like all the other guys are like, yeah, so what's up, and the kid and blah, 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 and all of that, and kind of like go Tony and all of that when I was a kid. But now I think most of the people, they don't see me as a kid anymore, and they already see me like, okay, so he's surfing like the same waves as us, like doing the same approach that we are doing. So yeah, he's not a kid anymore.
So you feel you've proven yourself? And
yeah, I feel that over the years I've been proving myself. Yeah.
What are your goals for the future?
My goals for the future, I mean, I have one main goal. It's like on career, but also personal, because like I said, Nazare is where everything started for me, like where I discovered one of my biggest passions. So like winning a contest in Nazare, you know, like with all my friends there, like all my family, the place that everything started, and like the people that were cheering for me since the beginning, and winning a contest with all that environment, I think that would be like amazing. So that's one of the main goals. And then I just want to keep like building my legacy and just travel all around the world and surf the biggest and the perfect waves ever.
That's a great goal.
It is.
I hope you win.
I hope I win too.
And now we're going to talk with Laurent Pujol, the Emmy-winning cinematographer who takes the most risky shots that you see in 100-foot wave. So we know you as a cinematographer. Garrett knows you as a professional surfer, and he's always talking about it, and I'm always so curious. I want to hear more about that past life.
Yeah, Garrett and I go way back, 90s, early 90s. We're kind of looking for the same wave, so that's kind of how we met, you know, just being out there. And I've always admired him for, you know, his charging, and looked up to him. And like today, when you see the modern day guys with all the pads on and the helmets, and he was doing that in the 90s, but it wasn't marketable back then. So he didn't even have a sponsor. Like he was just running on the beach looking like a football player. You know, it wasn't politically correct, and it wasn't really a way of marketing that back then.
He was a cowboy.
He was a cowboy, a precursor, especially. You know, he was the first to do it, and yeah.
So how did you get into surfing?
So I got into surfing when I moved to South Florida, which is not a great place to surf, as you know.
Laurent actually grew up in the same town I did in Fort Lauderdale.
How crazy is that? Oh, that's wild. So I started surfing at Fort Lauderdale, Yankee Clipper, and the waves are small and good to learn how to surf, and it's always warm. So
how did you become a pro surfer?
So I learned in America, and I didn't stick out in America. I was top 5,000 maybe, you know, and there was a high level back then here in America. There is still, but I mean, there was no level back in France. So I decided to go back to France, being I had my passport, and there was a tour in Europe at the time, EPSA, that I wanted to go back and do, and just, you know, like try to be live the dream for a few years. And I went back to France, and I just totally worked. I went from being top 5,000 to top 3 in France or Europe, and I was honestly saying if it could work for 5 years, I'd be happy, but ended up working for 20.
So I don't know what happened. What happened? How come you, like after the 20 years you said of pro surfing?
Yes.
Then what happened?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's time to move on. You know, there was a younger stronger, better looking, and surfers behind me that were just kind of on the way out. I lost a sponsor because they filed bankruptcy at the time, and I just didn't battle to try to get another one. I just took a couple years off, surfed a little bit, and figured out the thing. And then I got into photography.
How did that come about?
It came about because I used to, traveling and having photographers often around and just seeing what they're doing. I've always loved cameras. I had a camera back then when I was a pro surfer, just portraits and stuff like that. But I've always been intrigued by cameras, always asking questions. And obviously I see that they're hanging out, they're still quite, they have a certain age, but they're still going to Hawaii or still going here left and right and living the dream. So yeah, I was just like, man, I could do that. And then being that I have, a high IQ in surfing and reading waves, and so I just went into the water photography and then water cinematography. That's all I do is just water.
What was that transition like? Was it pretty smooth, or because you paved your way into the surfing, world, and now you had to be accepted as a cinematographer, right?
Yeah, it's smooth as long as first you got to go into it and just drop the ego and just realize that you're behind the camera, not in front of it anymore. So you're here to make other people look good. And then as soon as you accept that, it's something I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed just making my friends shine and just being out there. And there's only a few sets of the day. There'll be like three big waves in one day. And if you're shooting, you could most likely shoot all three, or at least two. As if you're surfing, you're going to get maybe one. So it's like you're living through these guys, but you're actually on all those sets, with them. So I really enjoy that part, getting close, short lenses, and just living, interacting with the surfers.
For a novice like me, how does it actually work? How do you get that shot?
The shot.
Yeah,
the shot.
The shot that everybody's like, oh my God, Laurent got the shot.
That's the shot. Yeah, it's just a lot of it, honestly, is provoked luck. It's just, you provoke it, you got to be out there for one, and then just read it, and man, it's hard. It's hard to explain.
But you're not on a surfboard out there, right? So are you swimming?
No, I'm swimming. I can be on a surfboard. I don't know if you've seen these shots. When I was in photography, I was pulling in behind guys with my surfboard, with my camera in the hand, and I was taking pictures of them.
And you'd stand up on your surfboard, so you were riding the wave. And
yes, I got to show you a couple pictures. Yeah, that was I called it the follow cam. So I did it people I could kind of sell you the photos easily, And my friends from surfing, so they were okay to do it with me, and it actually worked quite well. So I can be on the surfboard surfing.
So you would be in the barrel behind, let's say, Kelly Slater.
Yes. There's a cool shot when he's squatting down. He's looking back at me.
And are you the only one who's ever really done that?
At the beginning, yes. I got the idea from a friend that he had a GoPro in his mouth. He came in and he showed it to me, and I was just like, wow, this is insane. How can I do this? Because the main thing when I got into photography was trying to get these shots from behind. You got to just turn the camera behind the guy, and if the guy if he bottom turns one bit, that means you're going to get spray all over the camera. He's got to go flat, and you got to stick the camera up at the same time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was my thing. I wanted to get that shot from behind. Every time it was just water drops or spray, and it's like, man, how can I get back there more? And then that came along and worked like a charm. Now the hard part is which one's the good one? It was 7 or 8 good pictures,
But I imagine both surfers have to be very talented surfers.
Yes. Well, yeah. You have some time in the barrel, and it's low line, high line,
But in Nazare, you haven't swam out at Nazare. And you haven't done that trick at Nazare. Have you tried it at Nazare? No. Oh, I think we have to do that. You towing behind Garrett, that would be insane. Have you thought about that?
I have. And for that to work, it's got to be a barrel. It's got to be in a tube, and it just can't be that big, because the bigger it is, the harder it is to hold my camera and compose my shot from, by.
So nearly impossible at Nazare.
The good size is 6 foot, but just really wide barrels, so we can both stand in it, or at least he, and I'm just But the bigger the wave, if we do this on a 60-foot wave, and I'm behind it, it's that 60-foot wave is going to look 20 foot. because that's what the fisheye does, the optic illusion. You're never going to get that 60-foot wave to look 100-foot. That's not going to happen. But that 6-foot wave can look 15. So I don't think it's worth it doing it out there.
Don't you get scared out there?
At Nazare?
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I do get scared. Just like we had an episode last swell where Antonio didn't turn around and he went for it and we hit it late and we flew really high on the ski and we flew so high that I just jumped off because I didn't want to come down with the ski. And then but the thing is, I had this jacket on made out of a wetsuit. This big jacket is like a trench coat. It's made out of a wetsuit material. So as I jumped off, I went feet first into the water, and as I penetrated the water, that jacket just filled up with water instantly. It was like, woof. And I had my housing in my hand, which has zero buoyancy with no leash, because I don't like the leash. It kind of bothers me. So I couldn't bring my hand up to swim up, and I was stuck with this one. I wasn't moving, just with my left hand. I wasn't moving by stroke, and I must have been down there like 40 seconds. And I was like a meter from the surface. And all I could think about, man, there's going to be a next one. But I can't. I knew if I let go of this camera, I'm never going to find it again. You know, it's going to be gone. It's
not a cheap camera.
It's $50K for the, you know, I'm not letting go of that. So, to answer your question, yeah, I see.
Well, what happened?
It can go wrong. So what happened is I finally started, feel like I could hear Antonio about boom, boom, zooming around, and I finally just got up by stroking.
With a one-hand stroke.
I was like acting like I had fins on, you know, but I didn't. And one hand stroked it up and made it up. And
so you don't wear fins on the ski?
Don't wear fins. And I will never wear a trench coat again.
Yeah.
Never.
Lesson learned.
Lesson learned.
Have you had any waves on your head from Nazare? Like, have you had a wipeout at Nazare?
Surfing, yeah, but not on the ski.
So not on the ski. So how big was it when you...
I only surf when it's 20 feet. Yeah, I don't.
So you haven't had a monster.
I haven't had a monster one, no. But yeah, I mean, hopefully never.
I love that on your website it says that your goal is to catch the trajectories, the curves, and the colors, to pass on the stories that are being told in front of your eyes. Would you say that is your main goal when shooting, or when you're shooting Nazare, do you have a different goal in mind?
The goal was, when I was doing these shots from behind, and was to take the general public in the tube with me, and just show them this vision from the tube. And the same thing goes in Nazare. I wanted to go there just to show that ground zero look at it, you know. As to before, it was all shot from the cliff, and sometimes the waves look a lot smaller from the cliff. Sometimes they look a lot bigger. It's just hard to gauge as to when you get that angle from the water. It just really gave it a new perspective. So that was my goal, was to, you know, show how gnarly it is out there. Yeah,
you really changed the game when it comes to being able to view Nazare from a different perspective. Because we have the drones, we have the lighthouse, but...
Well, that was such the goal. I'm happy to hear you say that. Yeah,
to see it from the water, you know, up until now, until you...
Only the surfers
looking up,
going,
had that view. And you really have brought in the world to seeing what it's like to be out there with those giants.
Yes. And also the emotions, the people riding the skis, and the stoke, the panic, you know, all that. It's just such gold.
Yeah, it is.
It's such gold.
Have you ever had to change your role out there? And have you had to rescue anybody, or? Yeah,
we've rescued, off the top of my head, we've rescued Maya 3 times. Not rescued to the point to where she's against the cliff, and you know, but her driver didn't see her and went in, and here she is, and here comes a big white double up that she's about to get on the head, which are those the worst, you know, not the ones that kind of break outside, but the ones that really double up. So that happens, you know. If that happens, okay, go grab her. But I mean, if his set's coming and the guy already sees her or him, and I tell Antonio, don't be a hero, let him go. He sees him already, you know, just in case really nobody sees him and we can really get him out of there. But that's that's the unwritten rule, you know. If someone's in trouble, you gotta. And also filming, if a guy's in trouble and he needs help, I'm gonna put the camera down, jump in the water, and grab him. You know, that's the plan. If he's already got 3 guys on him helping him, I'm going to film it. because you need this stuff. You need this stuff. This is what's going to make the story, you know? Even if that guy is going to get upset at me that day, or his parents, or I don't know, in 10 years, they'll be so happy to see it, just to show how gnarly the place was and what they were doing. And so it's kind of like a hate me now, love me later thing. So if he's got help, I'm shooting.
Have you gotten into that situation?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've shot rescues, and not to the point to where they were bleeding and knocked out.
But did they get upset?
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
Or fights, you know, I've filmed fights. You know, where the fuck are you filming that? So I'm like, well, I mean, this is my job, you know. It's like Vietnam, you know, if a guy's getting bombed, you got to shoot it, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not all roses out there. There are
roses.
egos. There are chaotic situations. There are mistakes. There are accidents.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it's just like regular life on land. There's going to be confrontation. And
Yeah. And I'm here to document it.
well, it's an honor to be part of your tribe, Laurent. And it was really fun getting to know a little bit more about you, things I didn't know. And I'd love to hear more crazy stories from back in the 90s one day, but we'll save that for another time.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Before we let you go, for our bonus clip this week, we're keeping with the theme of episode 5, and it's a little dark and a little scary. It's Laurent Pujol, who we just spoke with, watching the clip of Cotty almost dying in the rocks.
Here's Alamao, just picked up Cotty, and boom, you get hit by that wave right there. And here's the rocks. And Cotty's on the right side of the big rock right here. Here's his ski right here, here's his jet ski. Right next to it, and he's on this side of the rock. He just got hit by that wave. At one point, we'll see the dot. Like he's trying to climb the rock right now. This is so gnarly. Look, here's his little dot. He's right fucking there next to this rock. And when you go out there on a flat day, this rock is huge. Like you're actually down looking up at it. See, it's panic. You can see him right here. He's trying to climb the rock. And then all this rip is just mowing through. And he kind of got in the rip. And it helped him so much, which is kind of good because it showed us the exit if that happens to us. You can see him right here. Look, look, look. This is wild. Hey, look at this wave. It lands right on top of him. Him, look, he's getting ripped into like a river right here. Here he is. And then he's just flushed out the back. Like, how many times has we've all looked at this situation and goes, man, if we go in there, you're dead. You're gonna die. But right there, he just showed us the way out.
This has been the official podcast for HBO's 100-Foot Wave. Next week, we'll be sitting down with my brother, CJ, to talk about what he went through being lost at sea. And our dad is joining us to talk about what it's like having a son lost at sea. It was a fun conversation and definitely one you don't want to miss. I'm Nicole McNamara, and remember, episodes air every Sunday at 8 p.m. Then join me for this podcast right after. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to chatting next week.